Starbuck CEO Kevin Johnson speaking there to CNN's Don Lemon. And we want to talk more about how Starbucks is handling this PR crisis. Laura Ries is a branding analyst and joins me here in the studio. Great to have you with us. You know, a clearly emotional Kevin Johnson there. He wants to fix this. He's just as shocked and surprised as most of us, in fact, that something like this could possibly happen in Starbucks, of all places, a company. It prides itself in being progressive. Do you think this action, this closure and training on May 29th will change the situation for Starbucks and turn this around?
Well, first of all, I mean, you're very right. Starbucks itself has set a very high bar. And not only that, the customers set a high bar for Starbucks. They expect more from Starbucks. And I think this has disappointed, obviously, the company. It's disappointed its customers and disappointed the country that we thought we were better than this. And so they have to do multiple things. First and foremost, they acted swiftly, decisively, and the CEO took this very personally. He went right out there. He looks exhausted on that thing and emotional, and it's true and it's real. And people really react to that authenticity. I think people right now feel, okay, he is taking this seriously. He is going to do something, and they immediately launched one thing they're going to do. One thing is not going to be enough, though. They can't just have one training session. You know, this is a big issue in our country, and they're going to have to do more than that. They're going to have to include it in all their training sessions and have lots of things, and lots of companies probably are taking notice and thinking, what are we doing?
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that, but before we get to that, I mean, he did mention that this isn't the only thing. The problem is, of course, May 29th is a way off, isn't it? Is. And you feel like they would need to actually do something a little sooner than that. But what else do they need to do apart from the training, do you think?
Well, you know, again, I think it was a shock that I think this happened in Starbucks, but it also is because their rules were very loose. Basically, you know, each manager was at their discretion to how they enforce this, whether or not you have to, you know, be a customer to use the restroom or how long you're allowed to loiter. I mean, listen, I lived in New York. I mean, there were restaurants up and down the street that had big signs, restrooms for customers only. This is, you know, but the problem is in how you enforce that. And if you are using it as a scapegoat to kick out people you don't find desirable in your store. And that's, I think, in this case, you know, the person made a very bad decision.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that there is video to show that there has been that discrimination. Where white people have come in, they haven't purchased things, and they have used the restroom, and that's the problem. And you raised there an issue I wanted to discuss, that this is a problem in the United States, this unconscious bias, a very nice way of saying racism. And the problem is, you know, we see this in Starbucks, we see it in restaurants, we see it all over. And for African Americans, they've said it's time to talk about this, and that's why we're seeing these protests at Starbucks.
Oh, I think time's up for a lot of issues. I mean, from, you know, the issues with women to issues with race. And I think this is right. I mean, when the story came out, sadly, it was not a shock for most Americans that this would happen, that people would try to, you know, enforce a rule for one person and not enforce it for another, because all the stories, you know, a white man in a suit or an old lady with a purse is unlikely to be refused, you know, the key to the restroom or call the police because they're sitting there without buying a coffee.
So you would expect to see other companies go, you know what, we need to do this. We need to be preemptive here and start this sort of training as well, to make people aware that sometimes you might not think you're racist or you might not think you're biased in some way, but when you do some sort of training like that, you might find that you are, in fact.
It is important, and I think it's also that, you know, the actions speak much louder than the words. So actually doing the training, actually it becoming a better experience in Starbucks, but, you know, maybe do we have to lock the restrooms in every location? Do we have to make it so difficult? I mean, they really have a culture, though, and I think they need to show this in every restaurant. It was the idea of Starbucks was to be the third place. You had home, you had work, and they encouraged you. They told you to hang out. And lots of people have, you know, business meetings and do their research papers and all sorts of things in Starbucks. Yet, unfortunately, in some cases, not everyone is allowed the same privileges.
Laura Ries, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.